Hey guys, welcome back to the Atlas Archives Deep Dive series, where we explore in depth the rich and fascinating histories and geographies of every country on Earth. Tonight's episode brings us to Bangladesh, one of the most densely populated nations on the planet. Stretching from the lush deltas of the Ganges-Brahmaputra river system to the forested hills of the Chittagong region, Bangladesh's landscapes are shaped by water, monsoons, and an enduring spirit that has defined its history across millennia. In this episode, we'll take a calm, steady journey through the geography, history, and cultural spirit of Bangladesh. From the ancient Buddhist kingdoms of Punjavadana to the Mughal splendor of Dhaka, from the independence struggle that birthed a nation in 1971 to the vibrant textile industry that powers its modern economy, this is a story of resilience, cultural richness, and transformation against all odds. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where and what time you're tuning in from. It's always fascinating to see how far this community reaches around the world. And if you're enjoying this series, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future deep dives. So, settle in, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's exploration of Bangladesh. Chapter 1: The Land of Rivers, Geography and Natural Foundation. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of the world's largest river delta. Before you stretches an endless expanse of green, punctuated by silver ribbons of water that wind their way through the landscape like veins, carrying life through a living organism. This is Bangladesh, a country whose very essence is defined by its relationship with water. The Ganges, known locally as the Padma, begins its journey in the distant Himalayas, that mighty chain of mountains where the ancient collision between the Indian and Eurasian plates thrust stone skyward toward the heavens. The Brahmaputra, or Jamuna as Bangladeshis know it, also descends from those snow-crowned peaks, carrying with it the sediment of millennia. The Meghna, the third great river, completes this trinity of waterways. Together, these rivers have sculpted a landscape unlike any other on Earth. The Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna Delta, often called the Bengal Delta, spans approximately 100,000 square kilometers across Bangladesh and the Indian state of West Bengal. It is not merely the world's largest delta. It is a testament to the patient work of geological time. For millions of years, these rivers have carried sediment from the Himalayan mountains, that colossal range still rising even today, and deposited it grain by grain into the Bay of Bengal. The sediment thickness beneath the delta can exceed 16 kilometers in some areas, a vertical column of earth and time stretching down through the ages. Picture, if you will, the junction where three tectonic plates meet beneath this land: the Indian plate, the Eurasian plate, and the Burma plate converge here in a slow-motion collision that has shaped not only the mountains far to the north, but also the very ground upon which Bangladesh rests. Since the Eocene epoch, some 50 million years ago, this delta has pushed the coastline 400 kilometers seaward into the Indian Ocean, an empire of Earth built one particle at a time by the tireless rivers. The geography of Bangladesh presents itself as a study in flatness and fluidity. Most of the country lies less than 5 meters above sea level, with the average elevation of the delta hovering around just 1 meter in the south. The land slopes so gently toward the Bay of Bengal that the gradient measures a mere 16 centimeters per kilometer. This subtle incline creates a landscape where water moves slowly, spreading across the floodplains during the monsoon season, bringing both sustenance and challenge to the land and its people. The three great river systems together drain a combined catchment area exceeding 2 million square kilometers. The Ganges alone, with its drainage basin of 1,114,000 square kilometers, gathers waters from across northern India before entering Bangladesh. The Brahmaputra, coursing through Tibet and Assam, claims 935,000 square kilometers of watershed. Each year, these rivers deliver approximately 1 trillion cubic meters of water and 1 billion tons of sediment to the Bay of Bengal. To put this in perspective, about 80% of this enormous sediment load arrives during the 4 monsoon months, when the rivers swell with the rains. The Bengal Delta is not a static landscape frozen in time, but rather a dynamic system in constant transformation. The rivers themselves have changed their courses dramatically over the centuries. 250 years ago, in 1776, the Brahmaputra flowed eastward to meet the Meghna, with the district of Bola positioned on its western bank. The river then underwent a dramatic shift, a process called avulsion, moving to its current southward course. This movement caused cascading changes throughout the river systems of southwestern Bangladesh, altering the distribution of fresh water and sediment across the delta. The climate of Bangladesh unfolds in distinct seasonal chapters, each bringing its own character to the land. From March through June, the hot season arrives, with temperatures climbing above 40 degrees Celsius in many areas. April typically claims the title of warmest month, when the sun bears down upon the delta with relentless intensity. Then, as if summoned by the heat itself, the monsoon arrives. The South Asian monsoon, that great annual phenomenon, brings warm, moist air from the Indian Ocean beginning in June. From June through October, the monsoon season drenches the country with rainfall that ranges from 1,000 millimeters in the drier western regions to more than 4,000 millimeters in the northeast. The regions near the Himalayan foothills where the monsoon winds rise and cool receive the heaviest precipitation. Nearly 80% of Bangladesh's annual rainfall arrives during these 5 months, transforming the landscape into a vast wetland. Consider the sheer volume of this precipitation. In Dhaka, the capital city, the annual average rainfall measures 1,854 millimeters, with about 80% falling during the monsoon months. The northeastern regions can receive rainfall approaching or exceeding 4,000 millimeters annually. Such abundance of water has made Bangladesh one of the wettest countries on earth, a land where the boundary between water and land becomes a matter of season rather than geography. November through February brings the cool, dry season, offering respite from both heat and deluge. Temperatures during these months can dip to around 10 degrees Celsius in January, the coldest month, particularly in the northern regions. The days grow pleasant, the humidity decreases, and the floodwaters recede, revealing the rich alluvial soil deposited by the monsoon floods. This cyclical pattern of wet and dry seasons has governed life in Bangladesh for millennia. The monsoon floods, rather than being purely destructive forces, bring essential benefits to the land. The floodwaters carry nutrients that replenish the soil, recharge groundwater aquifers, and sustain the delta's diverse ecosystems. Agricultural productivity, particularly for rice cultivation, depends upon this annual renewal. The Bengali farmers have long understood this rhythm, timing their planting and harvesting to the pulse of the monsoon. Yet the relationship between Bangladesh and water contains within it both blessing and peril. The very flatness that allows rivers to spread life-giving silt across the land also makes the country extraordinarily vulnerable to flooding. During major flood events, a quarter or more of the country can disappear beneath water. The flood of 1998, for instance, killed approximately 1,000 people and left more than 30 million homeless, destroying that year's entire rice crop. The Bay of Bengal, that great arm of the Indian Ocean, presents its own dangers. Tropical cyclones, generated in the warm waters of the bay, periodically make landfall on Bangladesh's coast with devastating force. The cyclone of November 1970 remains etched in the nation's collective memory, with peak winds exceeding 220 kilometers per hour and a storm surge reaching 6 to 10 meters in height. This catastrophic storm claimed an estimated 500,000 lives. The surge pushed inland as far as 200 kilometers, demonstrating how the low elevation of the delta amplifies the destructive power of these storms. More recent cyclones, such as Cyclone Amphan in 2020, which caused 2.5 million displacements, continue to remind the nation of its vulnerability. The monsoon floods of the same year inundated a quarter of the country, displacing nearly 2 million people. These are not aberrations, but recurring features of life in a delta nation. Climate change has begun to alter this ancient relationship between land and water. Rising sea levels threaten to submerge significant portions of the country. Scientists project that a 1-meter rise in sea level could inundate 17 to 21% of Bangladesh's total area. Given that more than half the country already lies below 5 meters elevation, the implications are profound. The frequency and intensity of extreme rainfall events have increased, with climate research suggesting that flood-causing extreme monsoon rainfall events have quadrupled in recent decades. The coastline itself remains in constant flux, shaped by the interplay of river sediment, tidal forces, and wave action. The active eastern delta continues to build new land through sedimentation, with the delta prograding seaward at approximately 17 square kilometers per year in recent decades. Yet this land-building process cannot keep pace with the challenges of subsidence and sea level rise. Some islands in the Sundarbans have already disappeared beneath the waves in recent decades, and more face this fate. The Sundarbans, that extraordinary mangrove forest, deserves its own contemplation. Stretching across 10,000 square kilometers at the southern fringe of the delta, where the rivers finally meet the sea, this is the world's largest mangrove forest. The name Sundarbans derives from the Sundari tree, a mangrove species once abundant in the region, or perhaps from Samudraban, meaning sea forest. 60% of the Sundarbans lies in Bangladesh, with the remaining 40% extending into India. The Sundarbans represents a unique ecosystem, a tidal mangrove forest intersected by a complex network of waterways, mudflats, and small islands. The forest consists of salt-tolerant trees that have adapted to the peculiar conditions of the tidal zone, where fresh water from the rivers mixes with salt water from the bay. These trees possess specialized roots called pneumatophores that emerge above the waterline to facilitate gas exchange when the forest floor is flooded by tides. The biodiversity of the Sundarbans astounds with its richness. The forest harbors approximately 334 plant species belonging to 245 genera and 75 families. Among the fauna, 693 wildlife species make their home here, including 49 mammals, 59 reptiles, 8 amphibians, 210 fish species, and over 260 bird species. The forest supports populations of estuarine crocodiles, Indian pythons, and the rare Ganges river dolphin and Irrawaddy dolphin. But the Sundarbans is perhaps most famous as the last mangrove habitat on Earth for the Royal Bengal tiger. These magnificent predators have adapted to an almost amphibious existence, becoming strong swimmers capable of crossing wide rivers and channels. They hunt spotted deer, wild pigs, fish, crabs, and even water monitors. Population estimates suggest between 400 to 450 Royal Bengal tigers live in the Sundarbans, representing one of the highest densities of tigers anywhere in the world. The Sundarbans performs crucial ecological functions beyond serving as wildlife habitat. The mangrove forest acts as a protective barrier for millions of people living in and around coastal areas, buffering the impact of cyclones and storm surges. The dense vegetation and complex root systems absorb wave energy and reduce wind speeds, while also preventing soil erosion. The forest serves as a vital carbon sink, storing vast amounts of carbon in its trees and soil, playing a role in climate regulation that extends far beyond its boundaries. Yet the Sundarbans faces mounting pressures. Rising sea levels, increasing salinity, upstream water diversion, and human encroachment all threaten this unique ecosystem. Several mangrove islands have been submerged in recent decades, and models suggest that substantial portions of the forest could be lost by the end of this century if current trends continue. The natural resources of Bangladesh extend beyond its rivers and forests. The fertile alluvial soil deposited by annual flooding has made the delta one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. Rice, jute, and tea thrive in this nutrient-rich earth. The extensive river system and coastal waters support vibrant fishing industries, with fish serving as a primary protein source for much of the population. The rivers themselves serve as transportation corridors, with boats remaining the primary means of travel in many areas even today. Bangladesh sits within a region of extraordinary seismic activity. The collision of tectonic plates that raise the Himalayas continues to generate earthquakes, and the delta region is no exception to this restless geology. While major earthquakes are less frequent than in the mountain regions to the north, the unconsolidated sediments of the delta can amplify seismic waves, potentially causing significant damage during strong earthquakes. The relationship between geography and human settlement in Bangladesh reveals itself in population distribution patterns. Despite the challenges posed by flooding and cyclones, or perhaps because of the agricultural opportunities created by regular flooding, Bangladesh has become one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. The delta's population density exceeds 1,000 people per square kilometre in many areas, with more than 300 million people depending directly on the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna system for their livelihoods. This dense population must navigate a landscape where approximately one-third of the area is permanently covered by water or becomes flooded seasonally. The people have adapted to this aquatic environment, building homes on raised earth platforms, using boats as primary transportation, and developing agricultural techniques suited to the flood regime. The distinction between land and water often blurs, creating a way of life intimately connected to the rhythms of the rivers. The ancient Greek and Roman geographers who wrote of the Gangaridai kingdom understood, even from their distant vantage point, that this was a land defined by its great river. The Ganges, they knew, flowed through a kingdom of elephants and warriors. What they perhaps could not fully grasp was how completely the river and its siblings would shape not just the physical landscape, but the entire trajectory of civilization in this region. From the Bronze Age settlements along the old Brahmaputra, to the ports that sent ships laden with muslin and spices across the Indian Ocean, to the modern cities rising on the delta, geography has been destiny for Bangladesh. The rivers brought sediment that built the land, The monsoon brought water that sustained agriculture. The forests provided timber and protection. The bay connected the delta to maritime trade routes stretching from Africa to China. As we conclude this opening chapter of Bangladesh's story, we leave you with an image, a land woven from water and earth, where three mighty rivers converge, where monsoon rains fall in torrents, where tigers swim through mangrove forests, and where millions of people have learned to thrive in harmony with forces that might seem overwhelming. This is Bangladesh, a nation built by rivers, shaped by monsoons, and sustained by the rich soil deposited through countless centuries. In the sections to come, we will trace how human civilizations rose and fell upon this delta, how empires were built and borders drawn, how languages and religions flourished, and how a modern nation emerged from this ancient land. But it all begins here, with the geography that made it possible, with the land of rivers that is Bangladesh. Chapter 2: Ancient Foundations, from Prehistoric to Medieval Bengal. As we settle deeper into our journey through Bangladesh's story, we turn from the rivers and deltas to the people who made these wetlands home. The relationship between humans and this landscape stretches back through time's mists to when first settlements took root along riverbanks now long vanished. The archaeological record speaks of ancient peoples inhabiting Bengal during the Bronze Age, 4,000 years past. These were organized communities understanding river rhythms, planting crops in fertile silt, trading goods across vast distances. The Wari Beteshwar ruins reveal sophisticated urban planning with paved roads, defensive ramparts stretching 5 kilometers, metalworking evidence, and artifacts showing trade connections reaching South and Southeast Asia. This was no isolated village, but a thriving hub in ancient commercial networks. By the 4th century before the Common Era, Bengal achieved prominence, capturing attention from the distant Mediterranean world. Ancient Greeks and Romans wrote of Gangaridai, a powerful kingdom commanding respect across the known world. The name derived from the Ganges River, that sacred waterway defining this land in distant imaginations. Diodorus Siculus, writing between 60 and 30 years before the Common Era, recorded accounts based on Alexander the Great's campaigns. He described Gangaridai as possessing the greatest number of elephants, the largest specimens of these mighty beasts. Megasthenes, living from approximately 350 to 290 before the Common Era, provided detailed observations. He wrote that the Gangaridai king commanded 1,000 horses, 700 elephants, and 60,000 troops. These were not mere numbers from imagination. Bengal's war elephants became legendary throughout the ancient world. Trained for battle, these creatures formed imposing cavalry breaking enemy formations, striking terror into opposing armies. The Gangaridai elephant corps' reputation spread so widely it influenced the greatest conqueror's calculations. In 326 before the Common Era, Alexander the Great, having conquered vast territories from Greece to the Indus River, stood at Gangaridai's threshold. His armies had defeated king after king, his phalanxes proven invincible against every foe. Yet here, at Bengal's borders, Alexander's advance halted. Ancient sources tell us the Macedonian conqueror withdrew, deterred by reports of formidable forces awaiting. Some historians suggest Alexander's troops, exhausted from years campaigning, refused further advance. Others propose the combined Gangaridai and Prasi might presented too great a challenge even for Alexander's legendary prowess. Whatever the reasons, Bengal retained independence when much of the known world fell before Macedonian advance. This achievement's memory echoed through centuries, recorded by Roman and Greek historians seeking to understand why great Alexander turned back. The Gangaridai capital's location, a city called Ganges, remains history's unsolved mystery. Some scholars believe Waribateshwar may be this lost city. Others point to Chandraketugarh in present West Bengal. These archaeological sites continue yielding secrets slowly, offering tantalizing glimpses of a civilization commanding international respect, but leaving only fragments to piece together. The Bengal region, known in ancient texts as Vanga or Samatata depending on specific areas, was renowned as maritime power. The Vanga kingdom sent ships across the Bay of Bengal, establishing trade with Java, Sumatra and Siam, which we know as Thailand. According to the Sri Lankan chronicle Mahavamsa, a Vanga prince named Vijaya Singha sailed to Lanka in 544 before the Common Era, establishing a kingdom there, giving rise to the name Sinhala for the island nation. Bengali merchants and settlers ventured throughout maritime Southeast Asia, carrying not only goods but cultural and religious traditions taking root in distant lands. As centuries progressed, Bengal came under great pan-Indian empire's influence. The Mauryan Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya around 321 before the Common Era, gradually extended authority over much of the subcontinent, including Bengal portions. The Mauryans brought sophisticated administration systems, extensive road networks, and most significantly, Buddhist faith transforming the region's religious landscape. The great Mauryan emperor Ashoka, reigning from approximately 268 to 232 before the Common Era, left his mark on Bengal. The Mahastanga inscription, discovered in modern Bangladesh, stands as one of the earliest writings found in the region. Written in Prakrit language using Brahmi script, this stone inscription contains instructions for stockpiling supplies, preparing for emergencies. The very existence of such administrative documents speaks to Bengal's integration into the broader Mauryan imperial system. Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism following the bloody Kalinga War initiated one of history's most remarkable spiritual transformations. The emperor dedicated himself to spreading the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, throughout his realm and beyond. Buddhist stupas attributed to Ashoka have been identified at various Bengal locations, marking Buddhism's deep roots beginning in the region. The port city of Tamralipti, near modern Tamluk in West Bengal, became an important centre for Buddhist learning and a gateway for the faith's spread to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. After the Mauryan Empire's decline, Bengal experienced periods of fragmentation, interspersed with incorporation into broader Indian empires. The Gupta Empire, rising to prominence in the 4th century of the Common Era, ushered in what many historians call the Golden Age of classical Indian civilization. Under Gupta rule, from approximately 320 to 550 of the Common Era, arts, sciences, literature, and philosophy flourished across northern India, including Bengal. The Gupta period witnessed remarkable achievements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and arts. The concept of zero as a number, fundamental to modern mathematics, crystallized during this era. Sanskrit literature reached new sophistication heights. Temple architecture evolved elaborate forms. While the Guptas ruled from their capital at Pataliputra in present Bihar, Bengal existed as semi-autonomous region within their empire, with local rulers paying tribute while maintaining considerable authority over their own affairs. The kingdom of Samatata in southeastern Bengal and the realm of Vanga in the south became important trade and culture centers during this period. The Chinese traveler Faxian, visiting the region in the early 5th century, described prosperous cities, thriving Buddhist monasteries, and a generally peaceful society. The Gupta influence in Bengal helped integrate the region into broader Indian civilization currents, while allowing local traditions continued development. Following Gupta power's decline in the 6th century, Bengal entered political fragmentation periods. Various local dynasties rose and fell, occasionally submitting to external powers, at other times asserting independence. During this uncertainty era, a significant moment in Bengali political history occurred. In the year 750 of the Common Era, the Gauda region's chieftains, weary of anarchy that had plagued Bengal after earlier kingdoms' fall, gathered to elect a leader who might restore order and stability. Their choice fell upon a man named Gopala, a local chieftain described as belonging to the Kshatriya warrior class. This king's election by an assembly of nobles represented a unique moment in Indian political history, a democratic element rare in hereditary monarchies' age. Gopala's election marked the Pala dynasty's beginning, which would rule Bengal and Bihar for approximately 4 centuries, from 750 to 1150 of the Common Era. The Pala dynasty takes its name from the Sanskrit and Prakrit word meaning protector, a fitting designation for a line of rulers who would bring unprecedented stability and cultural flourishing to Bengal. Gopala himself reigned for about 20 years, establishing administrative foundations and consolidating control over Bengal and Bihar parts. But it was his son and successor who would elevate the Pala dynasty to true imperial greatness. Dharmapala, reigning from approximately 770 to 810 of the Common Era, transformed the Pala realm into one of northern India's most powerful empires. The name Dharmapala means protector of the Dharma, and this king lived up to his name through both military conquest and religious patronage. Dharmapala's armies expanded Pala control far beyond Bengal, at times extending influence over much of northern India. He became embroiled in the great tripartite struggle, a century-spanning conflict between 3 major powers, the Palas in the east, the Gurjara Pratiharas in the west, and the Rashtrakutas in the Deccan, all vying for control of Kannauj, a city of immense strategic and symbolic importance. Though Dharmapala's armies suffered defeats in battle, his diplomatic skill allowed him to place his own candidate on Kannauj's throne, making the Palas the paramount power in northern India, at least temporarily. But Dharmapala's greatest legacy lay not in military campaigns, but in his Buddhism and learning patronage. He founded the great Vikramashila University, which would become one of the world's most important centers of Buddhist education, rivaling even the famous Nalanda University. Devapala, who succeeded Dharmapala and reigned from approximately 810 to 850 of the Common Era, continued his father's military expansion and cultural patronage policies. Under Devapala, the Pala Empire reached its greatest territorial extent. The emperor's reputation spread far beyond India's shores. The Sailendra, king of Sumatra and Java, requested and received permission from Devapala to endow a monastery at Nalanda for scholars from his distant kingdom. This act symbolized Bengal's position at the heart of a vast Buddhist cultural sphere stretching from Tibet to Southeast Asia. The Pala period represents Buddhism's golden age in Bengal. The Palas, devout Mahayana Buddhism followers, transformed Bengal into the world's foremost center of Buddhist learning. The great monasteries, or viharas, that they built became destinations for monks and scholars from across Asia. The Somapura Mahavihara, constructed during Dharmapala's reign in what is now Pahapur, Bangladesh, stands as testament to Pala architectural achievement. This massive monastery complex, covering 21 acres with 177 cells for monks, numerous stupas and temples, and a great central shrine with distinctive cruciform design, was described in contemporary inscriptions as pleasing to the eyes of the world. The architectural style developed at Somapura influenced temple and monastery construction throughout the Buddhist world, with echoes of its design visible in structures as far away as Myanmar and Indonesia. Chinese travelers who visited Bengal during the Pala period wrote admiringly of the great viharas, the learned monks, and the vibrant intellectual culture they encountered. The Pala rulers also made significant contributions to art and literature. A distinctive art school emerged under their patronage, producing exquisite sculptures in stone and bronze. These artworks, depicting Buddhist deities and scenes from the Buddha's life, demonstrated refined aesthetic sensibility and technical mastery. Many of these sculptures survive today in museums around the world, silent witnesses to medieval Bengal's artistic achievements. Yet the Pala dynasty, like all empires, experienced cycles of rise and decline. After Devapala's death, the empire entered weakness periods, beset by internal rebellions and external invasions. Powerful feudatories asserted their independence, and rival dynasties encroached on Pala territory. The Chola king Rajendra from southern India even launched raids into Bengal in the early 11th century, inflicting defeats on the Pala rulers and carrying away considerable plunder. A revival came under Mahipala I, who reigned from approximately 988 to 1038 of the Common Era. This capable ruler recovered control over northern and eastern Bengal, restoring Pala prestige and pushing back against enemies on multiple fronts. After Mahipala's reign, however, the dynasty entered terminal decline. The last great Pala emperor, Ramapala, who ruled from approximately 1077 to 1130, managed through military skill and diplomatic acumen to restore Pala authority one final time. His reign is immortalized in the Ramacharita, a Sanskrit historical poem composed by court poet Sandyakara Nandi, blending history and legend in recounting the king's achievements. But the days of Pala dominance had passed. A new power was rising in Bengal, one that would bring dramatic religious and cultural changes to the region. The Sena dynasty, whose name derived from the Sanskrit word meaning hawk, began as feudatories of the Palas, controlling territories in western Bengal. The Senas originated from Karnataka in southern India, part of a migration wave bringing southern warriors and Brahmins to Bengal. Vijayasena, reigning from approximately 1095 to 1158 of the Common Era, transformed the Senas from subordinate rulers into Bengal's masters. Taking advantage of Pala weakness, Vijayasena expanded his territory steadily, conquering southern and eastern Bengal. By the mid-12th century, he had supplanted the Palas as the dominant regional power, establishing Sena rule over a united Bengal. The Sena dynasty brought about a marked religious transformation in Bengal. While the Palas had been devoted Buddhists, the Senas were Orthodox Hindus, specifically followers of the Brahmanical tradition. Under Sena rule, Hinduism experienced renaissance in Bengal. The rulers patronized Hindu temples, sponsored Sanskrit learning, and promoted Brahmanical rituals and social structures. The caste system, which had become relatively flexible under Buddhist influence, was reinforced and made more rigid. This Hindu revival did not mean Buddhism's immediate disappearance from Bengal, but it marked Buddhism's decline, beginning in the land that had been its strongest bastion in India. Buddhist monasteries continued to function, and Buddhist scholars still taught and wrote, but they increasingly found themselves marginalized as royal patronage shifted to Hindu institutions. The Sena period witnessed significant achievements in Sanskrit literature and religious philosophy. Jayadeva, author of the Gita Govinda, a lyrical poem celebrating the love between the god Krishna and Radha, lived during the Sena era. This work would become one of the most beloved texts in Hindu devotional literature. The Senas also commissioned numerous Hindu temples and promoted Brahmin learning, attracting scholars from across India to their court. Yet even as Hindu culture flourished under Sena patronage, Islam's early stirrings began to reach Bengal. Arab merchants had been trading along India's coasts since Islam's early centuries, and Muslim travelers brought accounts of the wealthy lands to the east. These early contacts remained peaceful and limited, but they presaged dramatic changes that would soon transform Bengal's religious and political landscape. The Sena dynasty ruled for roughly a century, with its power concentrated in northern and western Bengal. The last significant Sena ruler, Lakshmana Sena, reigning from approximately 1179 to 1204 of the Common Era, presided over a prosperous realm, but this prosperity would make Bengal a tempting target for ambitious warriors seeking fortune and glory. In the late 12th century, as the Sena dynasty appeared secure in its power, forces were gathering far to the west that would bring revolutionary change to Bengal. The Ghurid Empire, based in what is now Afghanistan, was expanding its power across northern India. The Ghurid sultans employed capable generals who led their armies in conquest after conquest, extending Islamic rule across the Indian plains. Among these generals was a man whose name would echo through Bengali history, Ikhtiar Uddin Muhammad Bakhtiar Khalji. Born in the Garamsir region of Afghanistan, Bakhtiar belonged to the Khalji tribe. He was an ambitious soldier seeking his fortune in the conquered lands of India. Contemporary sources describe him as having unusual appearance, short in stature, with long arms extending below his knees. This physical peculiarity initially hindered his career, as he was rejected for military service by both Muhammad of Ghor and Qutb-ud-Din Aibak in Delhi. Undeterred, Bakhtiar eventually obtained a position under a provincial governor, who granted him 2 villages as land grant. From this modest beginning, Bakhtiar gathered followers and began conducting raids into neighboring territories, building his reputation and his forces. His success in these ventures attracted more Khalji warriors to his banner. By 1203 of the Common Era, Bakhtiar felt strong enough to attempt a bold stroke. That year, Bakhtiar launched a raid into Bihar, conquering the region and destroying the great Buddhist monastery of Odantapuri. This attack dealt a severe blow to Buddhism in northern India, scattering monks and burning irreplaceable texts. Flush with the booty from Bihar, Bakhtiar turned his ambitions toward Bengal, that wealthy land whose reputation had spread throughout the Muslim world. In the winter of 1204, Bakhtiar embarked on his audacious campaign against Bengal, leading his cavalry through the little-travelled Jharkhand region. He advanced toward Nadia, then the capital of the Sena kingdom. Bakhtiar moved so swiftly that only 18 horsemen could keep pace with him. The vanguard arrived at Nadia disguised as horse traders, and before the defenders realized what was happening, they had seized the gates and penetrated the palace. The aged Lakshmana Sena, now in his 90s, was taken completely by surprise. According to the Persian chronicler Minhaj-i-Siraj, who visited Bengal 40 years after these events, the king fled through the back door of his palace, escaping to eastern Bengal with a handful of followers. The ancient Sena capital fell without significant resistance, and when Bakhtiyar's main army arrived, Muslim rule in Bengal began. Bakhtiyar quickly moved to consolidate his conquest, making Lucknowti, known today as Gaur, his capital. He divided his new territories among his lieutenants, establishing an administrative system modelled on Islamic governance. Mosques and madrasas began to appear in Bengal for the first time. The Khalji conquest marked not merely a change of dynasty, but the beginning of a new religious and cultural era that would reshape Bengali civilization. Thus, as we reach the end of this chapter in Bangladesh's ancient story, we find a land that has seen the rise and fall of mighty kingdoms, the flowering of great religions, the building of magnificent learning centers, and the arrival of new peoples and faiths. From the prehistoric settlements along the rivers, through the legendary Gangaridai who deterred Alexander, the Buddhist flowering under the Palas, the Hindu revival of the Senas, to the Islamic arrival with Bakhtiyar Khalji, Bengal had become a crossroads of civilizations, a place where different traditions met, clashed, and ultimately began to blend into something uniquely Bengali. In our next section, we will explore how Bengal developed under Islamic rule, how the Bengal Sultanate flourished and created a distinctive Islamic Bengali culture, and how this land would eventually attract the attention of even greater powers, the Mughals and later the Europeans, who would shape the destiny of Bangladesh in ways that continue to resonate today. But for now, rest with the knowledge that Bangladesh's ancient foundations run deep, built upon thousands of years of human endeavor in this land of rivers. Chapter 3: Mughal Bengal and Colonial Transformation. Following Bakhtiyar Khalji's conquest, Bengal entered a new chapter as an Islamic realm. For over a century, various governors and local dynasties ruled under the nominal authority of the Delhi Sultanate, though distance and geography often allowed Bengal considerable autonomy. In 1352 of the Common Era, a significant transformation occurred when Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah unified Bengal, establishing an independent sultanate that would endure for over 2 centuries. The Bengal Sultanate represented a remarkable fusion of Islamic and Bengali traditions. Unlike many Islamic kingdoms that imposed Persian or Arabic as court languages, the Bengal sultans embraced Bengali, elevating it to a language of administration and literature. This decision would have profound consequences for Bengali identity, allowing the language to flourish and develop its distinctive character. The sultans commissioned Bengali literature, built mosques incorporating local architectural styles, and created a syncretic culture where Islamic and Hindu traditions coexisted and influenced one another. The economy flourished under the Sultanate. Bengal's fertile deltaic soil produced abundant rice, while its craftsmen wove the finest cotton muslins in the world. These fabrics, so delicate they were said to be woven from evening dew, commanded extraordinary prices in markets from Cairo to Canton. The sultans also promoted jute cultivation and encouraged maritime trade. Bengali ships sailed throughout the Indian Ocean, carrying goods to Arabia, Persia, Southeast Asia, and even China. The sultans maintained diplomatic relations far beyond Bengal's borders. They sent embassies to Ming China, exchanged letters with Persian poets, and pledged nominal allegiance to the Abbasid Caliphate in Cairo, though in practice they ruled independently. European travelers who visited Bengal during this period marveled at its prosperity. The kingdom's wealth derived not only from agriculture and trade, but also from skilled manufacturing. Bengali artisans produced fine textiles, metalwork, and shipbuilding that earned international renown. Yet this period of independence would not last indefinitely. Far to the west, a new power was rising that would eventually subsume Bengal into a vast empire. The Mughal Empire, founded by Babur, a descendant of both Timur and Genghis Khan, began its conquest of northern India in 1526. Babur's grandson, Akbar the Great, who reigned from 1556 to 1605, set his sights on Bengal's wealth. The Mughal conquest of Bengal proved lengthy and difficult. The region's geography, crisscrossed by rivers and subject to monsoon floods, made military campaigns challenging. Local resistance remained fierce. But gradually, through a combination of military force and diplomatic marriages, the Mughals extended their control. By 1576, Bengal had been incorporated into the Mughal Empire, though it would take several more decades to fully pacify the region. Under Mughal administration, Bengal became one of the empire's most valuable provinces. The Mughals appointed governors, known as subadars, who oversaw revenue collection and maintained order. The land revenue system, refined under Akbar and his successors, extracted significant wealth from Bengal's agricultural productivity. Yet the Mughals also invested in infrastructure, building roads, bridges, and caravanserais that facilitated trade and communication. The 17th century witnessed Bengal's transformation into what many called the paradise of nations. The province's economy reached unprecedented heights. Bengal produced more than half of the textiles consumed in Europe, where demand for Indian cotton and silk seemed insatiable. The muslin of Dhaka became legendary, with the finest varieties commanding prices equal to their weight in gold. Shipbuilders in Chittagong constructed vessels that sailed across the world's oceans. Agricultural productivity soared as new lands were brought under cultivation. The population grew substantially, reaching perhaps 30 million by the late 17th century. Towns and cities expanded. Dhaka, the Mughal capital of Bengal, became one of the largest cities in the world, with a population exceeding 400,000. The city's merchants grew wealthy from the textile trade, building elaborate mansions and endowing mosques, temples, and public works. This prosperity attracted attention from distant shores. European trading companies, seeking to profit from the lucrative Asian trade, established factories and trading posts along Bengal's coast. The Portuguese arrived first, founding settlements in Chittagong and Hooghly in the 16th century. The Dutch East India Company followed, then the English East India Company, and finally the French. Initially, these European companies operated as traders, purchasing Bengali goods for export to Europe. The Mughal authorities tolerated their presence, granting them trading privileges in exchange for customs, duties, and gifts. The Europeans built fortified factories, small settlements where they could safely conduct business and store goods awaiting shipment. Relations between the Europeans and local authorities alternated between cooperation and conflict, but the balance of power remained firmly in Mughal hands. However, as Mughal power weakened in the early 18th century, opportunities arose for more ambitious Europeans. The empire faced challenges on multiple fronts: Persian invasions, Afghan incursions, and rebellious provincial governors. In Bengal, the Nawabs, as the governors were now called, exercised increasing autonomy from the imperial court in Delhi. By the 1700s, Bengal functioned as a virtually independent kingdom, though nominally still part of the Mughal Empire. The English East India Company, headquartered in Calcutta, had grown wealthy from Bengal trade. Company officials engaged in private trading alongside their official duties, amassing personal fortunes. Tensions developed between the company and Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah, who viewed the English fortifications and growing power with alarm. These tensions exploded in 1756 when Siraj-ud-Dowlah attacked and captured Calcutta. The company responded by sending Robert Clive, a military commander who had made his reputation fighting the French in southern India. Clive recaptured Calcutta, then made secret alliances with Bengali nobles and merchants who resented Siraj-ud-Dowlah's rule. At the Battle of Plassey on the 23rd of June, 1757, Clive's small force defeated the Nawab's much larger army. The victory owed less to military prowess than to betrayal, as key commanders in the Nawab's army, including Mir Jafar, had been bribed to defect or remain inactive during the battle. The Battle of Plassey marked a watershed in South Asian history, though initially the company maintained the fiction of ruling through puppet Nawabs. Within a few years they had assumed direct control over Bengal's revenue collection and administration. This transformation occurred not through deliberate imperial policy, but through a series of opportunistic decisions by company officials seeking profit and power. The consequences for Bengal proved devastating. Company rule brought economic exploitation on an unprecedented scale. The company officials, known as nabobs, extracted enormous wealth through monopolies, arbitrary taxation, and corruption. They manipulated markets, forcing weavers to sell at below-market prices while charging exorbitant rates for raw materials. Traditional craft production declined as artisans found themselves impoverished by company policies. Agricultural productivity suffered as well. The company demanded ever-increasing land revenues, regardless of harvest conditions. Peasants who could not pay faced eviction or imprisonment. Investment in irrigation and infrastructure declined. The delicate ecological balance that had sustained Bengal's agriculture for centuries began to deteriorate. The worst consequences manifested in 1770 when a catastrophic famine struck Bengal. A combination of drought, crop failure, and company policies led to mass starvation. Contemporary estimates suggest that 1/3 of Bengal's population, perhaps 10 million people, perished. The company, focused on maintaining revenue collection, did little to provide relief. This famine exposed the brutal reality of company rule and shocked observers in both India and Britain. The outcry over Bengal led to attempts at reform. The British Parliament passed regulatory acts aimed at controlling the company and protecting Indian interests. Warren Hastings, appointed as the first Governor-General in 1774, attempted to establish more systematic administration. However, corruption and exploitation continued as company officials and British private traders pursued personal enrichment. Gradually, the British Crown assumed greater control over Indian affairs. The Government of India Act of 1833 ended the company's commercial activities, transforming it into an administrative body. Following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, known to the British as the Mutiny, the Crown abolished the company entirely, establishing direct colonial rule under the British Raj. Despite the exploitation and suffering, the 19th century also witnessed remarkable cultural developments in Bengal. The Bengal Renaissance emerged in Calcutta, where a new educated class, exposed to Western ideas while grounded in Indian traditions, produced extraordinary intellectual and artistic achievements. Ram Mohan Roy, often called the father of the Bengal Renaissance, advocated for social reform, including the abolition of sati, the practice of widow burning, and promoted education that combined Indian and Western learning. Bengali literature flourished as writers adapted new literary forms while drawing on traditional themes. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote novels that stirred nationalist sentiment, including Anand Math, which contained Vande Mataram, a song that would become an anthem of the independence movement. Rabindranath Tagore, perhaps Bengal's greatest literary figure, wrote poetry, stories, plays, and songs that earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. His works explored themes of humanity, nature, and spirituality, transcending cultural boundaries. The visual arts also thrived. The Bengal School of Art, led by Abanindranath Tagore and others, sought to revive Indian artistic traditions while incorporating influences from Japanese and other Asian art forms. This movement rejected the academic realism promoted by colonial art schools, instead emphasizing indigenous aesthetics and subjects drawn from Indian history and mythology. Yet alongside these cultural achievements, political tensions intensified. The British decision to partition Bengal in 1905 inflamed nationalist sentiment. Lord Curzon, the Viceroy, claimed administrative efficiency motivated the partition, which divided Bengal into a predominantly Muslim eastern province and a Hindu-majority western province. However, many Indians viewed it as a deliberate attempt to weaken Bengali nationalism by dividing Hindus and Muslims. The partition sparked widespread protests. The Swadeshi movement emerged, advocating boycott of British goods and promotion of Indian products. Students, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens participated in demonstrations. Revolutionary groups formed, some advocating armed resistance against British rule. The agitation proved so intense that the British reversed the partition in 1911, though the underlying communal tensions remained. Economic conditions for ordinary Bengalis deteriorated during the colonial period. The destruction of traditional industries, particularly textiles, left millions unemployed. Land revenue policies impoverished peasants, while absentee landlordism concentrated wealth in few hands. Periodic famines continued to strike, though none approached the 1770 catastrophe's scale until the 20th century. During World War II, Bengal experienced another horrific famine. In 1943, a combination of natural disasters, wartime policies, hoarding, speculation, and administrative failures led to mass starvation. Estimates of deaths range from 2 to 3 million people. The colonial government's response proved woefully inadequate. Food continued to be exported from Bengal, even as people starved in the streets of Calcutta. This famine, like its predecessor, revealed the fundamental callousness of colonial rule. By the 1940s, the independence movement had grown irresistible. The Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, though disagreeing on the future constitutional structure, both demanded an end to British rule. In Bengal, political divisions deepened between Hindus and Muslims, with the Muslim League gaining strong support in the eastern districts where Muslims formed the majority. As independence approached, the spectre of partition loomed once again. Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League demanded a separate nation, Pakistan, for India's Muslims. Bengal would be divided, with the Muslim-majority eastern districts becoming East Pakistan, while the Hindu-majority western districts remained part of India. Despite proposals for an independent, united Bengal, communal violence and political realities made partition seem inevitable. On the 15th of August, 1947, British India gained independence and was simultaneously partitioned into India and Pakistan. Bengal was divided along communal lines, a process accompanied by horrific violence. Millions of refugees fled across the new borders, Hindus moving west to India, Muslims east to Pakistan. Communal massacres claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Ancient communities were uprooted, families divided, centuries of shared history seemingly erased in an instant. Thus we reach a moment of profound transformation as Bengal, that ancient land of rivers and poets, traders and mystics, found itself divided. The eastern portion, now East Pakistan, would face new challenges and opportunities. Separated by over 1,000 miles from West Pakistan, with which it shared only religion, East Bengal would soon discover that political unity required more than faith alone. The seeds of future conflict had been sown, but so too had the foundations for a new national identity that would ultimately lead to Bangladesh's birth. In our next section, we will explore the Pakistan period, examining how linguistic and cultural differences created tensions between East and West, how economic exploitation echoed colonial patterns, and how Bengali nationalism grew stronger, ultimately exploding in the language movement that would set the stage for independence. For now, rest with the knowledge that through centuries of conquest and change, through Sultanate and Mughal rule, through colonial exploitation and partition, the Bengali spirit endured, adapting and persisting, carrying forward into an uncertain future. Chapter 4: Pakistan Period and the Language Movement. On the 15th of August, 1947, as the sun rose over the subcontinent, two new nations emerged from the ashes of the British Raj. Pakistan, conceived as a homeland for South Asia's Muslims, came into being as a geographically anomalous state, two wings, separated by over 1,000 miles of Indian territory, shared little beyond religion. West Pakistan, comprising Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and the northwest frontier, held the capital and political power. East Pakistan, the former eastern Bengal, contained the majority of the population but would soon find itself treated as a colony within its own country. The disparity between the two wings became apparent from the very beginning. West Pakistan inherited most of the infrastructure, military installations, and administrative apparatus from British India. Karachi, then Islamabad, served as the capital, placing the centres of power thousands of miles from East Pakistan. The civil service and military officer corps drew predominantly from West Pakistan, particularly Punjab. East Pakistanis found themselves underrepresented in every institution of national importance. Economic policies favoured the West at the East's expense. East Pakistan produced jute, the golden fibre that became Pakistan's primary export and foreign exchange earner. Yet the revenues flowed to West Pakistan, which controlled the central government and used these funds to develop its own infrastructure, industries, and military capabilities. East Pakistan received a fraction of development spending despite having 56% of the population. The Eastern Wing produced wealth that built the Western Wing's prosperity. This economic exploitation echoed the colonial patterns Bengalis thought they had escaped with independence. Foreign exchange earned through jute exports from East Pakistan financed industrial development in West Pakistan. Import licenses, which determined access to foreign goods and machinery, went disproportionately to West Pakistani businessmen. When East Pakistani entrepreneurs sought to establish industries, they faced bureaucratic obstacles, while their Western counterparts received government support and subsidies. The disparity extended to every sector. Defense spending, which consumed the largest portion of the national budget, primarily benefited West Pakistan, where military bases, ordnance factories, and defense industries were located. East Pakistan, despite its larger population and vulnerability to cyclones and floods, received minimal investment in disaster preparedness or infrastructure. The two wings existed in fundamentally unequal relationship, one extracting resources, the other providing them. Yet it was language, that most intimate marker of identity, that would catalyze the first major confrontation between East Pakistan and the central government. The Bengali language had evolved over centuries, shaped by Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, and indigenous influences. It was the mother tongue of the vast majority of Pakistan's population. Yet Pakistan's founders, primarily Urdu-speaking Muhajirs who had migrated from India, envisioned Urdu as the sole national language. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan's founder, made the government's position clear during his visit to Dhaka in March 1948. Speaking at a public gathering, he declared that Urdu, and only Urdu, would be Pakistan's state language. He dismissed suggestions that Bengali should receive equal status, arguing that a single national language was necessary for unity. His words met with protests from the audience. Students who understood that language policy represented much more than administrative convenience. The language question touched the core of Bengali identity. Bengali was not merely a means of communication, but the vehicle of a rich literary tradition stretching back centuries. Rabindranath Tagore had won the Nobel Prize writing in Bengali. Countless poets, writers, and scholars had enriched the language. To be told that Bengali had no place in official Pakistan felt like an assault on Bengali culture itself, a denial of the very identity that made East Pakistanis who they were. Students at Dhaka University began organizing protests. They formed committees, held meetings, and planned demonstrations demanding that Bengali receive recognition as a state language alongside Urdu. The movement gained momentum throughout 1948 and 49, drawing support not only from students, but from intellectuals, writers, and ordinary citizens who saw language rights as inseparable from political rights. The government responded with repression. Authorities banned public meetings, arrested protesters, and dismissed the language movement as the work of troublemakers and Hindu agents seeking to destabilize Pakistan. This accusation particularly stung, as it implied that demanding recognition for Bengali somehow made one less Muslim or less Pakistani. The government seemed unable to comprehend that one could be simultaneously Pakistani, Muslim, and Bengali, that these identities could coexist rather than conflict. Tensions escalated through 1950 and 51. The central government remained adamant that Urdu alone would be the state language. East Pakistani leaders, including members of the Muslim League itself, increasingly found themselves at odds with the party leadership in Karachi. The language issue became a focal point for broader grievances about political marginalization and economic exploitation. On the 21st of February, 1952, the simmering tensions exploded. The government had imposed Section 144, prohibiting public assemblies. Students at Dhaka University declared they would defy the ban and march in support of Bengali language rights. As protesters gathered, police confronted them near the university campus. Tensions mounted, then shots rang out. Police fired into the crowd of unarmed students. Several fell, their blood staining the streets of Dhaka. Abul Barkat, Abdul Jabbar, Rafiq Uddin Ahmed, Shafir Rahman, and others whose names would be forever etched in Bengali memory were killed that day. They died demanding the simple right to speak, learn, and conduct official business in their mother tongue. Their martyrdom transformed the language movement from a political campaign into a sacred cause. News of the killings spread rapidly. Dhaka erupted in protests. The next day, despite continued prohibitions, thousands gathered at the site of the shooting. They built a Shaheed Minar, a martyr's monument, overnight, a makeshift structure that authorities would later demolish, but which would rise again, this time permanently, as a symbol of Bengali resistance. The 21st of February became Shaheed Dibosh, Martyrs' Day, observed annually with solemn remembrance and renewed determination. The language movement achieved its immediate goal. Facing sustained protests and international criticism, the Pakistani government eventually conceded that Bengali would be recognized as a state language alongside Urdu. The Constitution of 1956 formally acknowledged both languages. Yet this victory, won through sacrifice and struggle, revealed the fundamental tensions within Pakistan. It demonstrated that the two wings held fundamentally different visions of what Pakistan should be. The language movement had broader significance beyond its specific demands. It established that East Pakistanis would not passively accept subordination. It created a generation of activists who had faced police bullets and survived, who understood that rights must be fought for rather than granted. It fostered Bengali nationalism, a growing consciousness that Bengali identity might be more fundamental than Pakistani citizenship. Political developments through the 1950s and 60s reinforced these lessons. Pakistan lurched from one political crisis to another. The military repeatedly intervened in politics, with generals seizing power in coups. Democracy remained perpetually deferred. East Pakistanis noticed that these military rulers invariably came from West Pakistan, primarily from Punjab. The army that was supposed to protect Pakistan seemed instead to protect West Pakistani dominance over the East. General Ayub Khan, who seized power in 1958, embodied these contradictions. His regime brought economic growth and modernization to West Pakistan while maintaining tight political control. He dismissed democratic aspirations as unsuited to Pakistan's conditions, arguing that guided democracy under military supervision better served national interests. East Pakistanis saw this as justification for continued Western domination. Economic grievances intensified. Studies revealed shocking disparities between the two wings. Per capita income in West Pakistan significantly exceeded that in East Pakistan. Government employment, military positions, industrial licenses, educational opportunities, all showed massive imbalances favoring the West. East Pakistan functioned as an internal colony, its resources extracted to fuel Western development, while its own needs remained unmet. In response to these conditions, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman emerged as East Pakistan's preeminent political leader, a protege of Sher-e-Bangla AK. Fazlul Huq and Hussein Shahid Suhrawardi, Mujib understood that East Pakistani grievances required political solutions. In 1966, he unveiled his six-point program, a set of demands that would reshape Pakistani politics and set East Pakistan on the path to independence. The 6 points called for a federal parliamentary system with maximum autonomy for the provinces. The central government would control only defence and foreign affairs, with all other powers residing with provincial governments. Each province would have its own currency and fiscal policy. The federal government could not impose taxes without provincial consent. Each province could maintain its own militia or paramilitary forces. Foreign exchange earnings would remain with the provinces. West Pakistani leaders reacted with fury. They denounced the 6 points as a recipe for Pakistan's disintegration. Ayub Khan called it a conspiracy hatched by India to destroy Pakistan. Mujib and other Awami League leaders faced arrest on sedition charges. The government launched the Agartala conspiracy case, accusing Mujib and others of plotting with India to secure East Pakistani independence through armed rebellion. The trial proved politically disastrous for Ayub Khan. East Pakistanis viewed it as persecution of leaders advocating for their legitimate rights. Mass protests demanded Mujib's release. The case collapsed amid popular pressure, and Mujib emerged from detention a hero, now widely called Bangabandhu, friend of Bengal. The 6 points, rather than being suppressed, became the rallying cry for East Pakistani autonomy. Ayub Khan's government fell in 1969 amid widespread protests. General Yahya Khan, the new military ruler, promised elections, Pakistan's first on the basis of universal adult franchise. He likely calculated that elections would divide East Pakistani votes among multiple parties, preventing any single party from dominating. He badly miscalculated. Before elections could occur, nature delivered a catastrophic blow. On the 12th of November, 1970, a massive cyclone struck East Pakistan's coast. The Bola cyclone, one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history, generated storm surges exceeding 20 feet that swept across the low-lying islands and coastal regions. Entire villages vanished. The official death toll reached 300,000, though many believe the true number exceeded 500,000. The cyclone revealed the central government's callous indifference to East Pakistani suffering. Response proved slow and inadequate. President Yahya Khan did not visit the affected areas for nearly 2 weeks. Relief supplies arrived in insufficient quantities. International aid organizations provided more assistance than Pakistan's own government. East Pakistanis watched in bitter anger as their government demonstrated that Bengali lives mattered little to those in Islamabad. The cyclone's political impact proved as devastating as its physical destruction. It demonstrated conclusively that West Pakistani rulers viewed East Pakistan as expendable. It strengthened Bengali nationalism and support for the Awami League, which had worked tirelessly in relief efforts while the government dithered. When elections finally occurred in December 1970, the results shocked Pakistan's rulers. The Awami League won a landslide victory in East Pakistan, capturing 160 of 169 seats. Nationally, this gave the Awami League an absolute majority in Pakistan's National Assembly, 167 of 313 seats. Under democratic principles, Mujibur Rahman should have become Pakistan's Prime Minister. The Awami League had earned the right to form the government and implement its program, including the 6 points. But Pakistan's military and West Pakistani political leaders, particularly Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, whose Pakistan People's Party had won in West Pakistan, refused to accept this outcome. They could not countenance East Pakistani leadership of Pakistan. They could not accept the autonomy the 6 points would grant East Pakistan. Democracy, it seemed, was acceptable only if it produced the desired results. Yahya Khan postponed the National Assembly session scheduled for March 3, 1971. This postponement, announced without consultation with the Awami League, constituted a fundamental breach of democratic process. East Pakistanis had voted overwhelmingly for a party, a leader, and a program. The military government's refusal to honor those results meant that democracy was a sham, that East Pakistan would never receive justice within Pakistan's framework. Mujib called for a general strike. East Pakistan ground to a halt. Hundreds of thousands participated in protests across the province. The Awami League effectively governed East Pakistan during this period, with government officials following directives from Mujib rather than from Islamabad. For practical purposes, East Pakistan had begun functioning as an independent entity, though formal secession had not yet been declared. Negotiations between Mujib, Yahya Khan, and Bhutto continued through March, but positions remained irreconcilable. The military leadership decided that force would succeed where politics had failed. They would crush Bengali nationalism, arrest Awami League leaders, eliminate intellectuals and activists, and terrorize the population into submission. Plans for military action proceeded even as negotiations continued, betrayal disguised as dialogue. Thus, we reach the brink of catastrophe, as decades of grievances, broken promises, and systematic exploitation culminated in existential crisis. The language martyrs of 1952 had died believing Bengali rights could be secured within Pakistan. The cyclone victims of 1970 had perished while their government looked away. The voters of December 1970 had cast ballots, hoping democracy might deliver justice. All these hopes now lay shattered. What followed would be both tragedy and triumph, horror and heroism, genocide and liberation. In our next section, we will witness the 9 months that forged Bangladesh in fire and blood, when Pakistani military unleashed systematic violence against Bengali civilians, when millions fled as refugees, when resistance coalesced into liberation war, and when ultimately a new nation emerged from unspeakable suffering. For now, rest knowing that the Bengali spirit, tested through decades of injustice, was about to face its greatest trial and demonstrate its unbreakable resilience in the crucible of war. Chapter 5: Liberation War and Birth of a Nation. On the night of the 25th of March, 1971, as darkness settled over Dhaka, the Pakistani military unleashed Operation Searchlight. This carefully planned operation aimed to crush Bengali nationalism through systematic terror. Troops moved through the city with orders to eliminate political leadership, silence intellectuals, and intimidate the population into submission. What followed would be remembered as one of the 20th century's darkest chapters, a genocide that would claim hundreds of thousands of lives. The military struck multiple targets simultaneously. At Dhaka University, soldiers attacked student dormitories, killing residents as they slept. Jagannath Hall, housing primarily Hindu students, became a scene of particular horror. Faculty members who had advocated for Bengali rights were hunted down and executed. The offices of newspapers that had supported the Awami League were destroyed, their staff arrested or killed. Across the city, gunfire and explosions shattered the night as the army methodically implemented its plan. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested in the early hours of the 26th of March. Before his capture, he managed to transmit a declaration of independence via wireless, proclaiming Bangladesh an independent republic and calling upon people to resist Pakistani occupation. This message, brief but momentous, marked the formal break between East Pakistan and the Pakistani state. The nation of Bangladesh had been declared, though it would take 9 months of war to make that declaration reality. Mujib was flown to West Pakistan and imprisoned, facing trial for treason. His captivity removed the Awami League's charismatic leader from the struggle, but it also made him a powerful symbol. Bangabandhu became the imprisoned father of the nation, his absence galvanizing rather than discouraging resistance. Others would lead the fight for freedom, but they fought in his name and for the vision of Bangladesh he represented. Major Ziaur Rahman, a Bengali officer in the Pakistan Army, broadcast a declaration of independence from Kalogut radio station in Chittagong on the 27th of March, speaking in Mujib's name. Other Bengali military personnel, police and paramilitary forces defected, taking their weapons and training to join the resistance. The East Pakistan Rifles, the Bengali regiment, largely went over to the independence side. These defections provided the emerging resistance with military expertise and equipment crucial for organized opposition. By April, a government in exile had formed. Awami League leaders who had escaped arrest gathered in Mujibnagar, a mango grove in the Meherpur district near the Indian border. On the 17th of April, they formally declared the independence of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, established a provisional government with Mujibur Rahman as president despite his imprisonment, and appointed Tajuddin Ahmad as prime minister. Colonel Mag Osmani, who had retired from the Pakistani military, was named commander-in-chief of all Bangladesh forces. The resistance organized itself as the Mukti Bahini, the Liberation Forces. These freedom fighters operated initially in small, mobile groups conducting guerrilla operations against the Pakistani military. Students, farmers, professionals, people from all walks of life joined the resistance. Women participated as fighters, medics, and intelligence gatherers. The Mukti Bahini established control over rural areas, particularly near the Indian border, while Pakistani forces concentrated in cities and major towns. The Pakistani military response to resistance proved savage. Unable to distinguish between freedom fighters and civilians, or perhaps making no effort to do so, the army committed widespread atrocities. Villages suspected of harboring Mukti Bahini were burned. Mass executions became routine. The military specifically targeted the Hindu minority, viewing Bengali Hindus as inherently disloyal. Hundreds of thousands were killed in what scholars now recognize as genocidal violence. Sexual violence became a weapon of war. The Pakistani military and their local collaborators, the Razakars and al-Badr forces, systematically raped Bengali women. Estimates suggest between 200,000 and 400,000 women suffered sexual violence during the 9-month war. Rape camps were established where women were held and repeatedly assaulted. This organized sexual violence aimed to terrorize the population, destroy Bengali honor, and create a generation of children who would be rejected by their communities. The scale of killing and violence created a massive humanitarian crisis. Refugees began fleeing to India by the thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. By the middle of the year, approximately 10 million Bengali refugees had crossed into India, overwhelming relief capacities. They settled in makeshift camps along the border, dependent on Indian and international aid for survival. The refugee crisis transformed what might have remained an internal Pakistani matter into an international humanitarian emergency. India found itself facing an impossible situation. 10 million refugees strained resources in adjacent Indian states. The humanitarian crisis demanded response, yet India faced international pressure not to intervene militarily in what some nations characterized as Pakistan's internal affair. Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi toured world capitals, meeting leaders and seeking to build international support for Bangladesh's cause and India's eventual intervention. Within Bangladesh, the Mukti Bahini adapted and grew stronger through the spring and summer. India provided sanctuary, training, and weapons to the freedom fighters. Training camps across the border prepared thousands of guerrillas, who then infiltrated back into Bangladesh to conduct operations. The Mukti Bahini divided Bangladesh into 11 sectors, each with its own commander, allowing for coordinated military operations across the country. Notable operations demonstrated the Mukti Bahini's growing capabilities. Operation Jackpot in August struck the Pakistani naval presence, with commandos swimming into Chittagong, Mongla, and Narayanganj harbours to attach limpet mines to Pakistani vessels. The operation destroyed or damaged numerous ships, demonstrating that the resistance could strike even seemingly secure military targets. Such successes boosted morale and proved that eventual victory was possible. The Pakistani military controlled major urban centres, but found the countryside increasingly hostile. Mukti Bahini ambushes made movement dangerous. Supply lines faced constant harassment. The military's brutality, rather than suppressing resistance, seemed only to strengthen Bengali determination. Each atrocity created more recruits for the Mukti Bahini, more families with nothing left to lose, more reasons to fight. The monsoon season from June through September complicated military operations for both sides. Heavy rains flooded large areas of the countryside, restricting movement and making the war's prosecution difficult. Yet the Mukti Bahini, fighting on home terrain, adapted better to these conditions than Pakistani forces. The monsoon provided cover for guerrilla operations and allowed the resistance to consolidate control over liberated zones. As autumn arrived, the military situation shifted decisively. The Mukti Bahini had grown from scattered guerrilla bands into an organized force capable of coordinated operations. Pakistani military casualties mounted, morale declined, and the army found itself increasingly isolated in fortified positions. The stage was set for India's direct intervention, which would transform the guerrilla war into conventional military conflict. Pakistan made the fateful decision to escalate by attacking India directly. On the 3rd of December, 1971, Pakistan launched Operation Chengiz Khan, a series of preemptive airstrikes against Indian air bases. This attack, modelled on Israel's success in the 1967 war, aimed to destroy Indian air power before it could be brought to bear. The operation largely failed, and it provided India with the justification for full-scale military intervention. India declared war on Pakistan and launched coordinated attacks on both the eastern and western fronts. In the east, Indian forces crossed into Bangladesh in multiple locations, advancing rapidly with Mukti Bahini support. The combination of professional Indian military power and local knowledge from Bengali freedom fighters proved devastating to Pakistani defensive positions. Towns and cities that had endured months of occupation were liberated in days. The Pakistani military found itself in an impossible position, cut off from West Pakistan by Indian territory, facing hostile populations, dealing with stretched supply lines, and now confronting the combined forces of India and Bangladesh they could not hold. Defensive positions that might have withstood guerrilla attacks crumbled before combined conventional assault. The Pakistani forces fell back toward Dhaka, their defensive perimeter shrinking daily. Indian and Bangladeshi forces advanced from multiple directions, employing combined arms tactics, utilizing air power, and coordinating movements to encircle Pakistani positions. The speed of advance surprised even Indian commanders. Towns fell in rapid succession. Jessore, Kamila, Sylhet, Mymensingh, Rangpur all came under Liberation Forces control. By mid-December, Dhaka itself was surrounded. The final days saw desperate fighting as Pakistani forces made last stands in various positions around Dhaka, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Pakistani command recognized that continuing resistance would only lead to more casualties without changing the inevitable result. Negotiations for surrender began even as fighting continued. On the 16th of December, 1971, at Ramna Racecourse in Dhaka, Pakistani Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi signed the instrument of surrender before Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora of the Indian Army. Approximately 93,000 Pakistani military personnel became prisoners of war. The 9-month war had ended. Bangladesh had won its independence. The scenes that followed the surrender combined jubilation and grief. People poured into the streets of Dhaka and cities across Bangladesh, celebrating freedom after 9 months of terror. The green and red flag of Bangladesh, centered with its golden Bengal, flew from buildings that had been draped in Pakistani colors. Victory songs rang out. Families reunited. Refugees began the journey home from India. Yet celebration was tempered by the knowledge of what independence had cost. The precise death toll from the 9-month war remains contested, with estimates ranging from 300,000 to 3 million. Whatever the exact number, the scale of killing had been enormous. Entire families had been wiped out. Villages had been destroyed. The social fabric had been torn. The trauma of those 9 months would mark Bangladesh for generations. In the war's final days, collaborators and Pakistani military personnel had targeted intellectuals in a last desperate attempt to cripple the emerging nation by eliminating its educated class. On the 14th of December, just 2 days before surrender, al-Badr forces had abducted professors, doctors, journalists, writers, engineers, and other professionals. Their bodies were later found in mass graves at Raya Bazaar and other killing fields around Dhaka. This massacre of intellectuals, occurring as defeat became certain, represented a final act of spite against the Bengali nation. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was released from Pakistani prison and returned to Bangladesh on the 10th of January, 1972. Millions lined the streets to welcome Bangabandhu home. He assumed leadership of the new nation as its first president and later prime minister. The work of building Bangladesh from the ruins of war could now begin in earnest, though the challenges ahead would prove immense. The birth of Bangladesh represented a remarkable achievement. A people had risen against military dictatorship, endured genocide, and ultimately prevailed. They had demonstrated that national identity based on language, culture, and shared aspirations could prove more powerful than religious solidarity imposed from above. They had shown that even seemingly overwhelming military force could not permanently suppress a people's determination to govern themselves. Yet independence came at terrible cost. The war had killed hundreds of thousands, displaced millions, traumatized survivors, and destroyed infrastructure. Women who had suffered sexual violence faced social stigma despite being honored officially as war heroines. The economy lay in ruins. Millions of refugees returning from India needed shelter, food, and rehabilitation. The intellectual class had been decimated. The challenges of nation building would test the new nation's resilience as severely as the war had tested its courage. International recognition came gradually but steadily. India recognized Bangladesh immediately. Bhutan followed. The Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc nations quickly extended recognition. Western nations proved more cautious, some viewing Bangladesh's creation as Indian intervention in Pakistan's internal affairs. The United States, which had tilted toward Pakistan during the war, delayed recognition for months. Pakistan itself would not recognize Bangladesh until 1974, but by early 1974, most nations had accepted the reality of Bangladesh's existence, and the country joined the United Nations. Thus, we reach the moment of triumph and tragedy intertwined, as Bangladesh emerged onto the world stage as the fourth most populous Muslim nation, born from blood and sacrifice, carrying the hopes of millions who had fought and died for this moment. The 16th of December would forever be celebrated as Victory Day, a date when courage had prevailed over oppression, when the impossible became reality, when Bangladesh as an independent nation finally took its place among the world's peoples. In our final section, we will explore how this newborn nation faced the challenges of reconstruction, how it navigated political turbulence and natural disasters, how it built institutions and developed its economy, and how Bangladesh has evolved into the nation it is today. For now, rest with the knowledge that though the path to independence ran through unspeakable darkness, the Bengali people emerged with their spirit unbroken, ready to build the Bangladesh they had dreamed of and fought for, a land where they could speak their language freely, govern themselves justly, and shape their own destiny. Chapter 6: Modern Bangladesh, Challenges and Transformation. The newborn nation of Bangladesh faced challenges that would have overwhelmed less resilient peoples. The war had destroyed infrastructure, killed or displaced millions, and left the economy in ruins. International observers questioned whether this densely populated, resource-poor country could survive. Yet the Bengali people, having sacrificed so much for independence, were determined to build a viable nation from the ashes of war. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, assumed leadership with enormous popular support but limited resources. The government focused initially on basic survival, repatriating refugees, providing food and shelter, restoring essential services. International aid flowed in, though not at the scale required. Mujib adopted socialist economic policies, nationalizing major industries and implementing land reforms aimed at redistributing wealth more equitably. The early years proved extraordinarily difficult. A devastating famine struck in 1974, killing hundreds of thousands. The causes were complex. Flooding disrupted rice production, global grain prices spiked following oil price increases, hoarding and speculation worsened shortages, and administrative failures prevented effective response. The famine revived painful memories of colonial-era famines and raised questions about the government's competence. Political tensions mounted as economic conditions deteriorated. The Awami League faced criticism from multiple directions. Left-wing groups argued the government had not pursued socialist transformation vigorously enough. Right-wing and religious parties opposed secular policies. Regional tensions emerged as some areas felt neglected in resource distribution. Mujib responded by concentrating power, establishing a one-party system under the Bangladesh Krishak Shramik Awami League, hoping unified leadership could address the crisis more effectively. This concentration of power, however well-intentioned, alienated many supporters and created opportunities for opponents. On the 15th of August, 1975, a group of military officers launched a coup, assassinating Sheikh Mujibur Rahman along with most of his family at his residence. Only his two daughters, Sheikh Hasina and Sheikh Rahana, survived, as they were abroad at the time. The assassination shocked the nation and ended Bangladesh's founding era. The following months saw political chaos as different military factions competed for power. Coups and counter-coups created instability. Eventually, Major General Ziaur Rahman, the military officer who had broadcast the Declaration of Independence from Chittagong, emerged as the dominant figure. He assumed the presidency in 1977 and began reshaping Bangladesh's political and economic direction. Ziaur Rahman, known popularly as Zia, proved to be a transformative leader. He shifted economic policy away from socialism toward market-oriented reforms, encouraging private enterprise and foreign investment. He promoted agricultural development, particularly food grain production, helping Bangladesh move toward food self-sufficiency. He established the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, creating an alternative political force to the Awami League. He also initiated the controversial policy of allowing religious parties back into politics, reversing the secular emphasis of the Mujib era. Zia's presidency brought stability and economic progress, but it came at the cost of democratic freedoms. Political opponents faced repression. The military maintained dominant influence over governance. Nevertheless, Zia's development initiatives, particularly in rural areas, earned him considerable support. His assassination in 1981 during an attempted military coup ended another era and plunged Bangladesh back into uncertainty. Lieutenant General Hussein Muhammad Ershad seized power in a coup in 1982, beginning another period of military rule. Ershad continued market-oriented economic policies and further emphasized Islam's role in national identity, declaring Islam the state religion in 1988. His rule brought economic growth but also increased corruption and authoritarianism. Opposition to military rule steadily mounted through the 1980s. By 1990, mass protests demanding democracy had become impossible to ignore. Students, workers, professionals, and political parties united in opposition to Ershad. Demonstrations paralyzed Dhaka. The military's loyalty to Ershad wavered. Facing this overwhelming pressure, Ershad resigned in December 1990, ending military rule and opening the path to democratic governance. Parliamentary elections in 1991 brought the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, now led by Khaleda Zia, widow of Ziaur Rahman, to power. This election marked the beginning of democratic alternation between the two major parties, the BNP and the Awami League, now led by Sheikh Hasina, daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. These two women, both widows or daughters of assassinated leaders, would dominate Bangladeshi politics for the next 3 decades. The democratic period brought both progress and persistent challenges. Elections occurred regularly, though often amid allegations of irregularities. Political violence between rival party supporters remained common. Hartals, general strikes called by opposition parties, frequently disrupted economic activity. The judiciary struggled to maintain independence. Corruption persisted at all levels of government. Yet despite these problems, Bangladesh maintained democratic forms and civilian rule, a significant achievement in a region where military coups remained common. Even as political struggles continued, Bangladesh achieved remarkable economic transformation. The ready-made garment industry, barely existing in the 1980s, grew explosively. By the 21st century, Bangladesh had become the world's second-largest garment exporter after China. Millions, predominantly women, found employment in garment factories, while working conditions often proved harsh and factory safety remained inadequate, as tragically demonstrated by the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013 that killed over 1,000 workers. The industry provided income and independence to women who previously had few economic opportunities. The microfinance revolution, pioneered by Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank, demonstrated that poor people, particularly women, were creditworthy and could use small loans productively. Grameen's model of group lending spread across Bangladesh and worldwide. Yunus received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for this work. Microfinance, combined with NGO programs providing healthcare, education, and skills training, contributed to remarkable improvements in social indicators. Bangladesh's achievements in human development often surprised observers who had written off the country as a basket case. Female literacy rates increased dramatically, child mortality declined sharply, family planning programs, implemented despite religious opposition, reduced birth rates significantly. Life expectancy increased from 46 years at independence to over 70 years by the 21st century. These improvements occurred despite continued poverty, demonstrating that social progress need not wait for economic prosperity. Natural disasters continued to test Bangladesh's resilience. Cyclones periodically struck the coast, though improved early warning systems and cyclone shelters reduced casualties compared to the 1970 Bola cyclone. Flooding remained an annual challenge, with particularly severe floods in 1988, 1998, 2004, and 2007 affecting millions. Yet Bangladeshis developed sophisticated adaptation strategies, including floating gardens, flood-resistant housing, and community-based disaster response systems. Climate change emerged as perhaps the greatest long-term threat to Bangladesh. Rising sea levels threatened coastal areas where millions lived. Increased flooding, more intense cyclones, saltwater intrusion into agricultural lands, and changing rainfall patterns all posed severe challenges. Bangladesh, contributing minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions, faced disproportionate consequences of climate change caused primarily by wealthy nations. The country became a leading voice, demanding climate justice and adaptation funding. Despite these environmental challenges, or perhaps because of them, Bangladeshis demonstrated remarkable innovation in adaptation. Floating schools allowed education to continue during floods. Development of flood-tolerant and salt-tolerant rice varieties helped maintain agricultural productivity. Community-based early warning systems for cyclones saved thousands of lives. International recognition of Bangladesh's climate adaptation efforts grew, with the country seen as a model for vulnerable nations. The 21st century witnessed Bangladesh's continued economic rise. GDP growth rates consistently exceeded 5% annually, often reaching 7% or higher. The country moved from low-income to lower middle-income status. The United Nations projected Bangladesh would graduate from least developed country status by 2026, a remarkable achievement for a nation that began as one of the world's poorest. Digital technology transformed aspects of Bangladeshi life. Mobile phone penetration reached extraordinary levels, connecting rural villages to markets and information. Mobile banking services allowed even the poorest to participate in the formal economy. The government promoted Digital Bangladesh, aiming to use technology to improve governance and service delivery. Tech startups emerged, particularly in Dhaka, creating a nascent innovation economy. Yet persistent challenges remained. Corruption continued to plague both public and private sectors, hindering development and eroding public trust. Income inequality increased even as absolute poverty declined. Infrastructure struggled to keep pace with economic growth, with traffic congestion in Dhaka reaching crisis levels. environmental degradation, including air and water pollution, threatened public health. The Rohingya refugee crisis, beginning in 2017 when over 700,000 Rohingya fled violence in Myanmar, strained resources and created new humanitarian challenges. Political tensions remained acute. The Awami League, returning to power under Sheikh Hasina in 2009, maintained control through subsequent elections that opposition parties and international observers increasingly questioned. The government justified restrictions on opposition as necessary for stability and development. Critics argued that democracy was being eroded, press freedom curtailed, and dissent suppressed. This tension between development and democracy, between stability and freedom, defined contemporary Bangladeshi politics. The war crimes trials, prosecuting collaborators from the 1971 Liberation War, demonstrated both Bangladesh's determination to achieve justice and the political complications of confronting past atrocities. Beginning in 2010, the International Crimes Tribunal Bangladesh tried individuals accused of genocide, rape, and crimes against humanity during the Liberation War. The trials divided opinion, with supporters viewing them as necessary for national healing and closure, while critics questioned procedural fairness and saw political motivations behind prosecutions. Cultural life flourished in independent Bangladesh. Bengali literature continued its rich tradition, with writers exploring themes of identity, memory, and social change. Cinema evolved from primarily commercial entertainment to include films addressing social issues and historical memory. Music blended traditional Bengali forms with contemporary influences. The celebration of Pohila Boishakh, the Bengali New Year, became a massive secular festival affirming Bengali cultural identity. The Ekushe Book Fair, held each February to commemorate the language movement martyrs, became one of the world's largest book fairs. Bangladesh also achieved recognition on the global stage beyond its economic progress. The country contributed significantly to United Nations peacekeeping operations, becoming one of the largest troop contributors. Bangladeshi peacekeepers served in conflict zones worldwide, earning respect for their professionalism. This international engagement helped Bangladesh establish itself as a responsible global citizen, far from the image of a struggling, disaster-prone nation that had defined international perceptions in earlier decades. Sports provided moments of national pride and unity. Cricket, introduced during the colonial era, became a national passion. Bangladesh's elevation to Test cricket status in 2000 and subsequent victories against traditional powerhouses brought joy to millions. Individual athletes achieved international success, with Bangladeshi competitors in shooting, chess, and other sports winning global recognition. These achievements, while seemingly modest compared to larger nations, carried enormous symbolic importance for a country still establishing its place in the world. As Bangladesh approached its 50th anniversary of independence in 2021, the nation had confounded pessimistic predictions. Rather than collapsing into chaos, it had survived and, in many ways, thrived. Rather than remaining dependent on aid, it had developed a growing economy. Rather than succumbing to environmental catastrophe, it had pioneered adaptation strategies. The journey had been neither smooth nor complete. Challenges remained formidable. But Bangladesh had demonstrated that a nation born in blood and suffering could forge a viable future. The Bengali spirit that had survived centuries of conquest, colonial exploitation, and genocidal violence persisted. That spirit, combining resilience with creativity, determination with adaptability, continued to drive Bangladesh forward. The land of rivers that had nurtured civilizations for millennia continued its journey, shaped by its people's aspirations and efforts, facing an uncertain future with the same courage that had secured independence. And so we reach the end of our journey through Bangladesh's story, from the ancient river deltas through the rise and fall of kingdoms, the suffering of colonial rule, the fire of liberation war, to the challenges and achievements of nationhood. This is Bangladesh, a land where geography shaped destiny, where language became worth dying for, where people transformed poverty into progress, where the impossible became reality. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you the knowledge that small nations can achieve great things, that human dignity cannot be permanently suppressed, and that the spirit of a people, tested through centuries, can endure and flourish. Rest now, knowing Bangladesh's story continues, written daily by millions who call this land of rivers home.